Lights, camera, action. How Hawaii's film industry is looking to play a larger role in helping to diversify Hawaii's economy.
We have leaders in the creative industries from both the public and private sector on the program today. Spotlight Now starts now.
You're watching Spotlight Now with Ryan Kalei-Suchi and Yunji Denise on Hawaii News Now. Have questions or comments for our guests? Join the conversation in our Facebook live stream. Spotlight Now, where Hawaii comes to talk.
Well, aloha and thanks for tuning in here on this Christmas Eve. Happy to be with you here as we present another episode of Spotlight Now. Of course, we want to always encourage all of you watching that you can engage in the conversation by, of course, heading over to our Facebook page or by scanning this QR code to be involved in the conversation. And our conversation today focusing in on Hawaii's film industry.
Yeah, and it is something that so many of us love and pay a lot of attention to, both as consumers of this content and also once in a while some of us are extras. I know a lot of people are really interested in what happens. Also, it's just fun to see Hollywood stars in our community. We want to welcome in Georgia Skinner, who is the Chief Officer of the Creative Industries Division of DBEDT, which is the Department of Business, Economic Development, and Tourism. A long title and a lot of responsibility.
A long title. And Mele Kalikimaka to you and to everyone listening today.
Oh, thank you so much for being here. So let's talk about the status of the film and television industry in Hawaii. We know that this has such an important economic influence on our community. How are we doing right now?
You know, it's an incredible time for us in many ways, but know that this is the anchor of our creative industries. The film industry, film and television production, and streaming are what bring new job opportunities to Hawaii. And because we have such a seasoned crew, they're well known far beyond our shores. So on average, we have about a $400 million industry. And what does that mean? That means that spend is going directly into the community. It's also going directly to those that are hired on the show. And at least, 33 million, one example, 33 million to local residents, that was on Rescue High Surf, and 31 million in terms of their development of local vendors and others that are thankfully here to support the industry. So it's not just those that have been trained in it, it's the community as well.
Let's talk a little bit about what exactly is filming right now and just where the state is overall with trying to support some of these projects. We know, of course, you had mentioned Rescue High Surf, but what are some of maybe the other shows or other projects that the state is pursuing right now?
Yeah, we're very fortunate to, in the big picture, what people may not recognize is that there is a huge industry downturn in production, about 40% lower than expected, a result of the pandemic and also the strikes. So you see that there are many less television shows and other feature films being made. However, Hawaii is still a favored destination, so thankfully we have a wonderful project from producer Eric Hayes that you'll be talking to shortly, and that is really a great project and a very big project, I think, for the state, as well as others that are being developed. We just wrapped Moana 2 live action, which coincided with the press tour of the animation Moana 2. So a lot of Moana focus in the last few months. And then coming up at the beginning of the year, possibly another 20th and ABC series coming to Hawaii. It's a pilot and a few episodes. So that's what we have on the docket right now. And what's exciting is seeing our local industry make their own films, and that is a really exciting time for our industry people as well as those who unfortunately have not been working because of the downturn in general across the United States.
We know that we're not the only state who wants to play in this game. Georgia obviously is a big one. Louisiana has done a lot of tax incentives, and then we have people, overseas. We have Canada being a very popular place to shoot, and now we're hearing more about Australia and New Zealand. So, what is that sort of global competitive landscape looking like? What are some of the other communities doing, and what could Hawaii mirror to get some of that business back here?
Hawaii, having a tax credit is a very important tool to be able to not only drive the production industry, but help us to build facilities to grow this to $1 billion industry. In order to do that, you need to have the production engine here. And part of the challenge, I think, is that balance of the budget between looking at the forecast for 6 years, and we have a 50 million cap currently on our credit, which means that productions can only pull out X number of dollars to total not any more than 50 million. Many other jurisdictions are higher than that, 128 million, New York, for example. We're a very different destination, but our major competition is international, and especially New Zealand and Australia. When you pencil out the numbers, it looks expensive for us to, be hosting productions here because it's a challenge. That's why we need the credit. And there are so many aspects to the credit. If we don't have the credit, you can't build facilities. You can't build facilities unless you have the workforce. So all those three things come together in a way that we need to focus on. We're hoping that this next session we can have some new elements of the credit, perhaps a bump for more local hires, extending the sunset date, which is important to generate interest, of course, for building a new facility. And because remember, we have a very small production facility at Diamond Head. Kalailoa is a temporary facility on lease to the department from the Navy. And then we have a private facility in Kaka'ako, the waterfront stages. So that's limiting, and we need to expand that.
If you can provide some context into the tax credit and maybe what specifically you're hoping the legislature will do, and maybe what is done in the past, because there have been other legislative sessions and bodies and members of the legislature who have advocated and pushed for this, and we have seen the fruits of those types of incentives come to fruition. Moving forward now, what is maybe the difference in this next ask coming around during this next legislative session?
Yeah, I would say that this session we have to think of two things that are primary. One, to keep this workforce working. And we're not going to be able to do that if we can't attract the productions to be here. We also have to go to LA and show our commitment with our lawmakers, with our leadership from the executive branches, mayors, et cetera, that show we mean business and we still need their support. I'm hoping that we see more development in terms of the caps. There's two caps to the tax credit, and this may not be as exciting to some, but the way that it does work is that only is a per project cap. So that means 17 million is all you can pull out of the 50, but we do prioritize local productions first, and they're the ones that get the first bite at the apple. And it's always done that way. Why? Because DBEDT is very focused on developing local talent, creating more IP for export, and seeing our own people write series that they can team with a showrunner like an Eric Hayes, for example, and be able to get that show over the finish line and get it acquired by a network or a streamer.
We're in a very competitive place in the creative industry. We're also in a competitive place when it comes to tourism. And so if you think about, I'd just love to hear your thoughts on what it means to Hawaii when we are showcased on programs like this. There is a marketing dollar that we don't have to spend, right? Because our beaches are showcased all around the world, and our mountains and all of the things that make Hawaii so special. What is the value add of that?
The value add is tremendous, and we actually asked the Tourism Authority and their research folks to do a study, which we do have, and we can share that with you so you can post it on the site for people to take a look at. It's a huge value add that doesn't cost us. And when you consider that anywhere in the world that you go, someone will say, oh, you're from Hawaii, Hawaii 5-0, or any of the shows that have really made Hawaii a landmark in people's minds. The study actually showed that decisions were made based on seeing these shows and feature films like Jurassic Park franchise, because they want to see the beauty and the lushness of the islands, and the tours from business people that are doing those tours on all neighbor islands and here on Oahu. Look at Kualoa Ranch, for example. There's the number one reason why it becomes a good business to support.
In your conversations with lawmakers about this, including Director Jimmy Tokioka, what has the response been by lawmakers that you've had these initial conversations with? Do you think that there is enough energy and support within the legislative body right now to really put some money behind this industry and really ask and really provide the things that you're asking for?
Yes, I do. And I see it year after year. It's been growing. I think there is, for the department, it is a critical, and our governor, a critical industry to nurture, to grow, and to expand in all the levels that we talked about today. And I see a very positive feedback from the legislature, especially in areas where we want to see more Native Hawaiian culture integrated into workforce, making sure that the people that are coming out of different programs, whether it be the Department of Education or the universities, where are those opportunities for them? And remember, the film industry really encapsulates all of the creative areas, whether it's art, music, culture, all of those pieces are really relevant, especially in our own locally developed content.
What do you hear from producers and people who are interested in bringing their productions to Hawaii but might make another choice? Does it come down to the dollars? Does it come down to talent, production facilities, all of the things that you kind of laid out? What are we missing that might make somewhere else a little more attractive?
Yeah, the number one question is the bottom line, as you said, Yunji. It is the number. And if you can't make that number, you're going to look to another destination that has beautiful tropical locations and other locations that will double for Hawaii. And we hate seeing that. And that is something that since 2023 we've been wrestling with, really, because the credit itself and the 50 million cap is limiting. And so how can we expand that, give lawmakers that confidence that both for budget and finance and all the reasons that we know to have a state balanced budget for 6 years, there at least is a way right now to guarantee what that is. And I think raising it will only generate more business and be able to address some of the other things that we want to address with the Department of Taxation as well.
And how much would you need to raise it, do you think?
I think 75 to 100 million. And I feel that, and again, this is from industry. We meet together as a group, our Hawaii Film and Entertainment Board, for example, and our director and our deputy director, Dane Wicker. It's important to us to have a competitive credit, but also balancing the impacts to the state budget.
Let's talk a little bit about just where things stand with the departure of CBS and the long-standing support that CBS Productions has brought to the state of Hawaii. When you look back at the impact that Hawaii Five-0 played, rolling into all the various productions that we saw after, most recently with NCIS. Was that a shock to you for when CBS decided to not renew NCIS Hawaii? And how do you think that continues to have a ripple effect on what we're seeing here today?
Yeah, it was a huge, unfortunate shock, yes. And I think the reasons for it are multiple levels. When you recall the timing of it, all these new NCIS franchises, the franchise had then committed to already producing 2 other productions. You have Paramount, which is the parent company of CBS, in flux. So there's an uncertainty there for what they can spend and what they can't. And then, the consideration of the tax credit. And I think all of those things combined, unfortunately, limited it. Where we are right now is we're in a very precarious spot. And that means that our division, Creative Industries, has to front costs for security, as well as for electricity and other things that the productions pay. And so if you have a 7-acre facility in Diamond Head and you have a 13-acre facility at Kalailoa, those costs are very, very high. Like just for security alone is over $96,000 for about 4 to 5 months.
Wow.
And I don't have that budgeted. So we're being as creative as we can, and we're thankful that the productions that are here now and committed, they do take on those costs when they come in. So yes, it was quite a setback, but it's a new day. And I think one of the things that I embrace about it is that there's always opportunity and setbacks. And that means, how do we push the creative IP from our local industry and get underneath that and invest in that as well?
Yeah, and let's talk a little bit about the local industry, because we focused largely on drawing folks here. What do you say to folks who are aspiring creatives, whether they want to be filmmakers or actors or grips or wherever they are on that spectrum of the creative arts? Is this a good place to learn, to grow, and what's your advice to them?
Oh, yes, it is a fantastic place to learn and grow. And remember, not everyone, you might be an artist and you're interested in animation, or you may be, someone that's a recording artist, but you would love to do soundtracks for film and TV. So there's lots of opportunities. I think we look to the University of Hawaii and its ACM program, also the UH Manoa School of Cinematic Arts. Those are great places. But in our Department of Education, there are so many programs right now, and have been for years, really recognizing Waianae, of course, Sea Riders, and many others. it's a great place to do it, and I think there's more and more community-driven organizations, OHINA, Pacific Islanders and Communications, all of these, and new programs on Maui, for example, the Hisako Children's Camp for youth, and many other programs throughout the state. So we're hoping to build an online hub so that everyone can find these things easily rather than having to do it piecemeal. So it was a big topic that came up in the Hawaii Women in Film gathering we had this weekend. And these organizations have done a fantastic job in sort of bridging that gap between if you're in high school, you graduate and you may not want to go into a program at a university, or you do. When you come out of it, there are these, almost master's types programs that are happening, including our Creative Lab Hawaii, which we established in 2013.
And how has things evolved and changed over time with the digital age and what we're seeing now? Because, back in the day, I could see where you're going after these large productions, you're going to these studios, but now streaming, obviously a big player now. So you're not only having these conversations, right, with these regular studios like CBS, but you're talking to streaming platforms as well. And then there are some that are just doing things online, just
Yes.
organically as well. How have you had to adapt the department and the needs of this growing industry in various sectors of distribution?
Yeah, I think what's primary is our State of Hawaii Film Office, led by Donnie Dawson and her team. They really help those productions come in. They attract them. They're really focused and hyper-focused on that. Creative Industries Division is a little more focused, and we know that they know what they're doing. So we focus mostly on those up-and-coming rising talent across the state. So this is a digital era where anything is possible. You can work remotely. We have all over the state, we have people that are doing visual effects for Marvel movies on Maui, for example, and many others that have shown us that post-production, post-audio production, all of those things, a lot of which are in the education facility at West Oahu, are really important to learn. And it's our job at the state to not only attract the business, but maintain it and rise up these local talents. And I think the digital industry that we have now is the biggest opportunity. Everybody's been praying for this moment. So remember, yes, we got to bring in the business, but we also have to rise up our local industry as well.
You mentioned earlier that this is a between $300 to $400 million industry for the state, but you also said that this has the potential to get to $1 billion. How do we get there?
How do we get there? Great. Well, we need facilities. We need to be able to amend the tax credit in a way that makes it more attractive. Legislation, or even at a city and county level, to have the incentives needed to be able to build a new facility. All of those things hand in hand and dovetailing with education and some of these other community-based programs is what we see at DBEDT as the pipeline, for example. We need to continue to bridge those gaps, which we have found through our Good Jobs Hawaii program. We've been handling that workforce development program, and Thomas Chalk leads that. And it is an important aspect of where we go as an industry. What is it going to take? Change the tax credit to something a little bit more favorable so that we're not in competition with the global market. And frankly, all of the U.S. right now is. So.
I just have to wonder when you look at the success that many local individuals have had, and then you just look at some of the numbers that we're seeing from Moana 2 and just the demand. We have live action Lilo and Stitch as well that is also coming out as well. There seems to be an interest, but not only an interest, but an affinity for things based in Polynesian culture and Hawaii. How can the state do more to leverage off of that? Because with the numbers we're seeing, it's evident and it's clear that people are falling in love with it.
And that's to get more Pacific Islanders and more Native Hawaiians in the writer's room. Make sure that we have those avenues, and that's our job, is to provide the access, guide them in a direction that makes sense, and also there is an affinity for this area of the world, and I think it is our time. And of course, I'm not from here, as you can tell, but my heart is here, and I've been here for 44 years, and this is the most active that I've seen interest in the state in terms of the content of what's being portrayed. No longer being a backdrop. We're integral to the storytelling from this place and how we're able to translate that into a larger market and not lose the IP. So that's what drives me to stay in this job, is that I see it, I feel it, I taste it, and I want to make sure that it's successful for everyone. And all of us in all the various areas of the industry believe in that. So I think it's just a matter of time and balancing both, and see what we can do. And also, we have a Hawaii Film and Creative Industries Fund now, and that is solely for developing local talent and financing them to make these projects.
I mean, when I hear you say that, what really strikes me is that storytelling is so core to Hawaiian culture, to the Native Hawaiian experience throughout time. And so having Native Hawaiians in the writers' room, like you said, I mean, that just makes a lot of sense, right?
It does, and it's happening. I mean, certainly with Chief of War and Thomas Pa'a Sibit, that's an excellent example. Dana Ledoux Miller on Moana 2 on both the live action and the animation, and a director, her first directing feature, big time feature. I'm just so proud of the people that have come back to mentor, which she has for Ohina programs as well. So yes, we have to do it, and we have to make sure that we retain the IP with the creator and get them the best licensing and distribution deals possible, or acquisition of their projects.
Okay, Georgia Skinner, thank you so much for being with us here on this Christmas Eve. We really appreciate your time. Stay with us. Chris Lee is joining us on the other side of the break. You're watching Spotlight Now. Welcome back to Spotlight Now on this Christmas Eve. We're focusing in on Hawaii's creative industries, talking about film and television production in the state of Hawaii and what can be done to make this a bigger part of our economy. Chris Lee is joining us now. He's the founder and director of the Academy for Creative Media Systems at the University of Hawaii. Chris, thanks for being here.
Merry Christmas Eve.
So good to see you. I want to just get your thoughts on what Georgia shared with us. Kind of a mixed bag, right? A lot of optimism in what she shared, but some realities too, that productions overall are down, and of course, NCIS not in Hawaii anymore. Yeah. We've seen some good news with the High Surf Rescue, but we don't know if that's going to come back. So, from where you sit, how is our film and television industry?
Well, as Georgia mentioned, there's an overall contraction in the industry. We sort of have this thing called peak TV, and everything overall is down about 50%. So we're not alone in this in terms of this downturn, but there are lots of shows that are coming here and lots of shows looking at coming here. We just have to be consistent about our incentives and how we bring them here, and hopefully we also build our infrastructure. We've done I think a really great job building our human capital through the Academy for Creative Media, which we now have 16 programs across 10 different campuses, and most of our students have stayed here. But on the other hand, I think she mentioned Dana Ledoux Miller was one of our very earliest students, and of course she's the co-writer, co-director of the Moana 2 both the live action and the animated feature, which also Bryson Kanoa-chan, who was one of our more recent graduates, and he was also on Dugi Kame Aloha. So, we're getting those writers and directors out there above the line.
Let's talk a little bit about what's happening out there in West Oahu, because there has been so much growth with this program and more to come. What can you tell us about how things have expanded and what's to come?
Well, we opened our Student Production Center a couple years ago. We were a little bit delayed by COVID. But I think the big news out there is we are now actively working on developing a privately funded 34-acre motion picture studio with hundreds of thousands of soundstage space. And it'll be done with private money, not with tax money. But it is actually on the campus of the University of Hawaii, and it'll be integrated into the ACM program.
Wow, and what kind of a difference could that make for a production that is thinking about coming to Hawaii, on the fence?
So Georgia was mentioning about capacity. If you look at big features like Moana, which was just here for I think 10 days of actual live action shooting, you look at something like the Jumanji shows, Jurassic Park, none of them can stay and do their stage work. And as I think most of the blockbusters require big stages, visual effects, a different kind of crew base than we currently have, but we're building it as we speak. But that'll never happen until we actually have the capacity, and so hopefully we get this done.
So what would that timeline look like, and what does it take to secure some of these projects? Because it's one thing to have it, but are you already beginning to reach out to potential production studios or projects that could be the first to utilize the space?
Well, at this point we're just talking about how we're developing it, and then the developers have to figure out their financing. But it was approved by the outgoing President Lasner to move forward. And I'm also very happy to say we're recording this before the date. Hopefully, Bill 59 is before a final reading at the City Council, and it will allow for property tax abatement for building a studio that costs at least $100 million and is on 10 acres. So it's a very high level of access, but I think it's a very wise way for the city and county of Honolulu to incentivize the building of a studio.
Yeah, and tell us a little bit about why for the city and the state you think that projects like these and the tax credits that Georgia was talking about are good investments, because we tend to focus on, the higher profile jobs that come along with this industry, the actors themselves or the directors. But there's a whole lot of people it takes to put a production on television or on the screen.
Not only that, but I think we have a minimum of 85% local crew on every show that comes here. High Surf Rescue is like 100% in the water unit and 90-something in the regular unit. NCIS and Magnum, I think they were both in the high 80s into the 90s. So people have to recognize that this money is being spent here. And for every dollar that gets spent here, it gets multiplied. And I know that DBEDT has calculated that I think with the $50 million cap, we actually are getting back $45 million in additional tax revenue. So we're really spending about $5 million a year to generate $700-something million in economic activity. And it's the largest sector of our economy outside of tourism and government and the military. So it really has been a success since Hawaii first instituted its incentives, I think 2006 with Act 88, where we never did more than $100 million a year in production. And since then, we've steadily risen to the $400 million a year that Georgia mentioned.
I just want to get your thoughts on how the industry has grown here in Hawaii. I think back to when I first worked with you, I was like an intern in the Senate, and
Yes.
he was always coming to the state legislature and asking for meetings.
Yes.
And so you've been around this process for some time, worked with many different iterations of administrations and lawmakers.
Yes.
How have you seen things evolved here in the state of Hawaii, and what would you ideally like to see long term?
Well, I think the support has been consistent, but I think sometimes people get maybe a little bit hung up like, oh, are we just supporting people from Hollywood? And that's not the case, obviously. I mean, there are so many multiple aspects to this business that contribute to our economy. I heard you asking previously about the tourism industry, and obviously anything that gets shot here is a 24-hour loop that's playing around the world, whether even if it's not here. And film tourism is an enormous part of this. I think DBEDT actually did a study showing what percentage of tourists actually come here to go to Kualoa Ranch to see where things were shot. I live around the corner from the house that was Hurley's, when it blew up in the pilot episode of Lost, and there's still these film tours that show up to show this house. So, it has an enormous impact. And the important thing about this is truly living wage jobs, and it's keeping people in Hawaii. I'm also very grateful, obviously, for all of the students that we've graduated that have stayed here in Hawaii, that have been part of these crews. And, Eric had fantastic interns from the Manoa program, and, we just had a music intern from our Mele program on the Moana live action, and we had interns on Lilo and Stitch and everything. So, it's really something that it's one of the few drivers that Hawaii can actually compete in. If you look at anything that requires a raw good to shipped in and a hard good to be shipped out, it's just not economically viable. So we really have to look to our own people and their talents, and we have to look at what you can do through broadband and through capture that doesn't require the manufacturing that we just can't compete with.
Yeah, and I want to key into something that you said, which is these are good jobs. You hear every election cycle, time and time again, economic diversification, that we need to go outside of tourism and to create more spaces where people can make a living wage. Tell me a little bit about that and sort of what you talk about with your students who are considering a career in the creative arts.
Yeah, so I didn't bring the chart with me, but DBEDT lists the creative economy as the number 9 contributor to our overall GDP. So that puts it ahead of so many other industries that you can think of here in the islands. And obviously, the reason the Academy for Creative Media was named that is because we were always looking towards the future and to how things are going to be captured, produced, distributed in the future, not so much as in the past. Because obviously, you have all these platforms now. There's no economic thing stopping you from creating content. You just have to make compelling content, because you can just put it out on the internet like say a Bretman Rock, or even before that a Ryan Higa, who are like pioneers of the social media set and become global superstars and stay here in Hawaii. So whether it's a social media director or it's somebody working in production, we try to cover all the bases through all our different programs.
Let's talk a little bit more about some of those programs. I mean, are you noticing something or a trend in popularity with these students who are now moving more into digital? Is there still a need for traditional storytelling? I mean, what are some of the interests of your students through this program?
There will always be a need for traditional storytelling, and the methods that we produce things by for over the last 100 years. And recently, the Manoa program has spun off into its own. It's called the School of Cinematic something. But for instance, the West of Wild program, basically everybody graduates from there becomes the local social media director for BMW or the Kroc Center or City Hall. So one of the great things about having so many different programs and campuses is we all do different things. Mele is the music program that we support, and that's where we did the Hawaiian language version of the first Moana, which we recorded with Ali'i, and Nicole Scherzinger came back, but we cast 30 new performers. Students recorded 4,000 new files. We also had to translate 10,000 words for both meaning and lip flap. We gave it away for free to every school and library and halau in the state that we could find as a way to encourage people to learn Hawaiian.
Yeah, and kind of building on that and something that Ryan had mentioned to Georgia, this idea that there is a lot of active interest in the stories of this place and diversifying that writer's room and the importance of that. Tell us a little bit about what you think on the sort of audience side about why there is that appetite for something different.
Well, indigenous people come from a culture that's not written, it's oral, it's visual, and so it's really dovetailed really well with how technology has been able to allow you to tell those stories. But for instance, Dana Ledoux Miller, who's part Samoan, like I mentioned, was one of our first students. She's become a very big showrunner in Hollywood, but at the same time, she's really in charge of the whole Moana franchise these days. She's not just doing the live action one, she's the animated one as well, and obviously there's going to be a third one because she set records over Thanksgiving weekend with the release of that. Not only is this the biggest Thanksgiving ever, but the biggest animation release ever. There was actually breaking news in the Hollywood Reporter that says she was shopping at Target when she found out. That's how big of a deal it is.
When we look at just your work and your history of work, through this industry and media, has it been challenging at all to convince people to do work in Hawaii? I mean, you have still a lot of contacts and friends, I'm sure, in Hollywood, but what is their appetite for coming to Hawaii, and what are some of the things that you found you've had to try to sell them on in order to bring production here?
Well, it's not cheap to shoot here. We are proudly a very strong union state, and we have terrific unions, and also we're in the middle of the Pacific, and for the same reasons we're not in manufacturing, there's a lot of reasons why it's more expensive to shoot here in the first place, which is why we need these stable credits. On the other hand, the blue skies, you look at the numbers that High Surf Rescue did when it was launched on Fox. You're going to have Eric on here soon. He was telling me how well NCS Hawaii is doing even now. High Surf Rescue is doing really, really well on Hulu. So, there is, while there is competition out there, there's nothing like a Hawaii show. And, a lot of the success of things like, the upcoming Lilo and Stitch, which is live action, which was all shot here, the upcoming Moana, really show there's a reason they come back here, because audiences like seeing Hawaii on the big screen.
Yeah, what do you see as the future of this industry? Georgia was talking about getting it to $1 billion. How realistic do you think that is, and what will it take?
It's realistic if we build this studio, because we're basically essentially at capacity now, because between the facilities that the state runs at Diamond Head and Kalailoa, when they're full, they're full. And as I said, you're never going to see the whole other side of production come here until we have, like really big stages. Like what we're planning is like multiple stages of like 18,000 square feet each, and then you open them up and it becomes 36,000 square feet, and open them up and it becomes up to like 80,000 square feet total. And that's the kind of stage work that you need for these big pictures.
We are almost out of time, but I do want to ask, as someone who works directly with students, what advice do you give to those students, or what would you say to those who are inspiring filmmakers or want to get into the industry? Is there a future for them here?
Oh, absolutely. And, it's not just the students that we have. I mean, we have some well, recently, one of our graduates, Alika Maikao, had Molokai Bound, and he also debuted at Sundance with Every Day in Kaimuki, which was made during COVID. But there's a woman named Zoe Eisenberg who did a picture called Chaperone on the Big Island, and it's a wonderful film. And these are not expensive movies. These movies can be made for a price and be true to ourselves and speak to the broadest possible audience. So I absolutely think that this is a field that students should consider.
Okay, Chris Lee, thank you for being here. We will be tracking the progress of this facility, and we hope to see you back here in a few months. Stay with us. We'll be talking with a Hollywood producer just after the break. Stay with us.
From the moment you wake up.
Hawaii News Now brings you the stories that impact your day.
With more on the breaking news, we go live to Casey Lund.
Ready with the push alert? I'm going live. We have an update to the breaking news we brought you this morning on Sunrise.
Okay, guys, as soon as this wraps, toss to Mahia.
And we've been covering this story all day.
Now we go live to Mahia for a new development.
Stand by for breaking news. They just captured the suspect.
That's confirmed?
Yes, sources just confirmed it.
The news you need the moment it breaks.
Here on Hawaii News Now.
First alert traffic is like always having a helpful passenger right next to you.
There's a crash up ahead in the left lane.
When we see a backup, we'll tell you live on TV.
That doesn't look too good.
And send an alert to your phone.
I'll type, you drive.
First alert traffic on TV, streaming, and on the Hawaii News Now app.
Keeping you and your ohana safe.
Spotlight Now with Yunji Denise and Ryan Kalei Suchi. Connecting you with newsmakers from throughout our islands. Going in depth with Hawaii's leaders. And taking your questions live. Spotlight Now, where Hawaii comes to talk.
And welcome back to Spotlight Now. We are continuing in on our conversation focusing on Hawaii's creative industries. We heard from the public sector, and now we're going to talk to a real Hollywood director and producer. We're so lucky to have Eric Hayes with us here today, co-producer on NCIS Hawaii and NCIS New Orleans, along with a number of films. Thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me.
So we heard from Georgia and Chris about the efforts that the state is making,
Right.
but I'm interested to hear from your perspective. How is Hawaii when it comes to thinking, in terms of, is it a great place to do this kind of work? What are some of the hurdles that you have to overcome?
Well, the state itself is a character in whatever project you're doing. The island's stunningly beautiful. There's so many places that you can shoot here. You've got a world-class film crew here. You've got world-class actors here. It's the upside of coming here to film is absolutely amazing, and we're just any production that really is here is blessed to be part of the island. So
let's talk a little bit about your role with NCIS Hawaii, and just what that show meant to you, to the people that worked with you, but also to the state, and maybe the surprise or what happened when you found out that it was not going to be renewed. Talk a little about your experience as a whole with the production.
Well, we moved here from New Orleans. I did NCIS New Orleans, so I moved here with my wife and 2 kids, and the show. We were extremely shocked when it didn't come back. It was one of those shows that is iconic to Hawaii. We showed the terrain, we showed Honolulu, Hawaii Kiki. The cast moved here, and it was one of those things where, unfortunately, I think we, between Paramount and CBS and everything that was going on over there, that we became part of a financial decision. But the ratings-wise was great, and it was an absolute blast to work on.
Tell us a little bit about what some of the challenges are and what kind of a difference you think, we keep talking about that $50 million cap and the tax credits. If Georgia is successful and others in lobbying lawmakers to actually raise it to $75 or $100 million, what kind of a difference do you think that makes?
Well, it'll open up a lot more productions to come here. Like they were saying earlier, if we had another studio here as well, it frees up a lot of space. The overall tax credit, it's capped at $17 million per production. So even if you bring $100 million project here, you're going to have 17 million, which is unbelievable. But it also allows other productions to come here and not use that cap the whole time.
When you look at just what your body of work and what you've done, in your career,
right.
What do you think makes Hawaii unique that Hawaii Film Office and lawmakers can really leverage on beyond just, of course, the beauty and things? But is there something different about filming here that caused maybe you to move your family to be here, to want to continue to live here? What is sort of that attraction here to the islands?
Well, the first thing is when we moved here, the Ohana feel and the vibe. Everybody opened up their arms and said, come on in. We were blessed to be brought over here as an NCIS TV show and to be able to film here.
Well, just thinking about the difference that, the sort of intangible thing about Hawaii that makes Hawaii special and worth bringing a production to, given that we are in the middle of the Pacific and for all of the challenges that we present, it's certainly not a cheap place to live, and I would think not to work.
No.
But what is that X factor that makes it worth it?
Well, besides the people and the crews and the members of SAG and the actors, the beaches, you can put a camera in pretty much any place and have this incredible backdrop. It's the working with the Film Commission in Georgia and DBEDT and all that kind of stuff. It's the big picture here is all about the island, and it's amazing to just be here.
If we can just talk a little bit about just going back to NCIS Hawaii and just the impact that it had on the local economy, because I'm sure you stay in contact with a lot of the people who still work on that show. It touched a lot of different sectors of our community, not just the actors and producers. I mean, there were a number of people involved in that. Talk to us about the scope of a production, what that really looks like, and the jobs and the people that are involved in putting on a weekly show like that.
Well, it not only brings a lot of money to the economy. I mean, from graphic designers to local mom and pop, markets that we go buy second meals and food from, to hotels that we're putting people up in, the location department renting people's houses and neighboring houses to put the luas in and things like that. So when you talk about the ripple effect of, let's say, $100 million project that comes here, and you get a certain amount back in your tax credit, you got to look past that, because so much else is put into the economy, and it's the local people really reap and the benefits of what we can bring.
Yeah, and tell us a little bit about what the sort of global market is. Who are we competing with? Georgia said we're really competing on an international scale with places like New Zealand and Australia. What are they offering that, we should mirror in kind?
Well, there's a couple of things. Yes, it's pretty much Australia and New Zealand, I would think. They have tax credits like we do. They have incentives like we do. The currency is exchanged. That's a big thing. But I think the state of Hawaii really stands up in terms of bringing productions here. I don't think that people are going to look to New Zealand to go shoot a Hawaii show there, or in Australia. It just happens where, if you get a little bit of extra money to go a little bit longer for your production, they may choose to go there. But we're trying to bring as many productions here as we can.
When you look as a whole, this industry and the business of film in Hawaii has gone through a lot in the past year. I mean, there was that writer's strike where, people were without jobs. And that was in the midst, I believe, of when you folks were shooting NCIS Hawaii, then crippled with the cancellation of the show. I mean, it's an industry that has gone through a lot this past year. How are people holding up that that work in this industry, that are trying to make it here? Or what are some of the ways that they're finding creative ways to still stay here despite maybe not having a regular show?
I'm actually going to go one step further. It's so many people depend on the film industry here. A lot of people have jobs that work, 10, 11 months out of the year. We can go from show to show to show where we only work 3 months or 5 months or 6 months or 8 months, and we're looking for that next show. What we've happened here is CBS all of a sudden disappeared, and I think we reaped the benefit of 12 years of having constant shows, 1 or 2 shows here plus movies, and then all of a sudden you have the runaway productions. And it's not just here, it's, it's all over the United States. But people are looking at construction jobs and things like that. But I'm in the process of trying to bring 2 to 3 TV shows here. I'm prepping a feature right now called Headhunters, and hopefully we can have a sustainable production film industry here where we know where our next job is coming from.
Yeah, tell us a little bit about the projects that you're working on. I know you can't give us too much, but what are some of the, that you just mentioned, a couple of television projects and also a feature film. What does that look like? And what is the pitch about Hawaii when you're having those meetings?
Well, the pitch about Hawaii, as a matter of fact, the movie that we're prepping right now, Headhunters, is actually written for Indonesia. And when it was brought to me, I was like, let's shoot it in Hawaii. We can definitely make Indonesia here. And it's a surf movie / thriller that we're lucky enough to have Kevin Costner, who's an actor and producer in it. Steve Holleran is our director. Scott Steindorf is one of our producers. And there was a little bit of a push to take it to Australia. And we all collectively said, you know what, the place to shoot this is in Hawaii. And it's not just the beaches, but when you go shoot in the mountains here, you don't get those any other places in the world. And so that's one project. I've got another one called Makaha with Matt Bozak, who is our showrunner on NCIS, that we're pitching to different studios in the beginning of 2025. And there's a couple other projects that are in development. So we would, I would like to, hopefully bring 3 or 4 more shows here next year.
I had asked this question to Georgia, but I'll ask it first to you as someone who has to do the pitching. How do you decide what goes to studios, what's more streaming? When you're going after like a Netflix or Amazon, and how has the industry changed because of the streaming platforms that have really taken over?
Well, I think when I started, it was 24 episodes of episodic television for CBS, ABC, NBC, or Fox. Now you got streaming where you got the Ozarks of the world and some of these others where you only do 10 episodes, or Breaking Bad and things like that. But when it comes to filmmaking, I have one show that is 22 to 24 episodes. I got another one that could be 10 episodes. It all depends on what you're looking for out of your show. It also where you want to take it, because if you're going mainstream ABC, CBS, NBC, you can only take what's the word I'm looking for? You can only go so far in content. But when you get to some cable shows, you can push the limits. So it depends on what the show is all about.
Yeah, you mentioned earlier just the creative talent that's here, and that's one thing, of course, that Chris Lee is working very hard to develop. Tell us a little bit about your view about the work that he's doing and others in the education space to kind of lift up new creatives and what our sort of talent pool looks like.
Well, I think the talent pool here is absolutely amazing. The crew here is world class. The actors here are world class. I think as productions come into Hawaii, we need to promote from within. Majority of the time you're going to hire local crew, but it's getting the actors, getting the background players, getting those type of people on the set and promoting that. What UH is doing when the studio gets put up and everything is in place, there's such a bigger area that you can go to. And locally, film student wise, the sky's the limit. It's interesting because you ask about the film students and what they can do. Everybody's got a dream. Everybody's got a thought process. Just because yours is unique, don't take no for an answer. Go make a short film as a film student. Go turn that into a feature. Write a script. Everybody's shooting on their iPhones now. So I encourage these young filmmakers as well, step up, know your craft, learn your craft, and become a great filmmaker.
When we look at just the impact, and you were talking about this earlier, of the amount of jobs and the people that are involved in any sort of production, is it unique that, because when we do this show, we talk to other people, a lot of other industries are flying in talent, right? They're flying in people to fill jobs or to work for certain projects, because we just don't have that here. To say that we have, the percentages that we heard of the amount of percentages of local people that are filling these jobs, it seems somewhat unique that we have enough people here in this industry that can fill all of these positions. What has been your experience in trying to find the talent and the people for all these different jobs on a production, to be able to fill that, and if local people can adequately fill those jobs?
Local people can definitely fill the jobs. Here's the question, a little bit of a producer or a director or whatever. Let's say you see a face or a name of an actor and they're on a show over here. They may not necessarily be the right to go over to this other show, or you don't want to see their faces too much in different shows and things like that. But the depth of field of people here and the amount of actors that you have here it's enough to sustain. You're definitely going to bring people from the mainland. Sure. That's just part of it. But you could definitely have a big enough crop of actors here that you can definitely fill a lot of those roles.
I want to ask you a question that we asked our previous two guests. This idea that Georgia's saying that she wants to see the industry at $1 billion. Do you think that we have that potential? And what do you think is going to move the needle to actually make that happen?
What Chris said. We need another production facility here. And if you have that, then you can bring in, have 4 projects here working at one time. In New Orleans, it's good for 2 to 3 projects. Here, you can probably do 4 projects. And then you're at your max, and then all of a sudden you are bringing people from the mainland. But from a crew standpoint and actor standpoint, to get to $1 billion, one more studio, and then I think the sky's the limit.
We are almost out of time. Just want to let you have one final word, any other message that you would have for those aspiring to be in the industry, those who want to maybe work on a show or project that you mentioned here today. What would you say to those who want to be involved in this industry here and stay here in Hawaii?
Well, if anybody wants to reach out and contact me, you've got my email. Feel free to give it out. But I think you got to have a drive. And I came up as a production assistant and up to directing and producing. And I would say to the young filmmakers now, learn the craft. Understand what everybody does. You just don't become a director or an accountant or a DP. Learn everybody's jobs and know what everybody does, so that way you understand what everyone brings to the project.
Yeah, that is good advice in any industry, but I would think in yours in particular. Eric, thank you so much for being with us today.
Thanks for having me.
And thank you for watching. Stay with us. We'll be right back after this.
From the moment you wake up.
Hawaii News Now brings you the stories that impact your day.
With more on the breaking news, we go live to Casey Lund.
Ready with the push alert? I'm going live.
We have an update to the breaking news we brought you this morning on Sunrise.
Okay, guys, as soon as this wraps, toss to Mahia.
And we've been covering this story all day.
Now we go live to Mahia for a new development.
Stand by for breaking news. They just captured the suspect.
That's confirmed?
Yes, sources just confirmed it.
The news you need the moment it breaks.
Here on Hawaii News Now.
Spotlight Now with Yunji Denise and Ryan Kalei Suji. Connecting you with newsmakers from throughout our islands. Going in depth with Hawaii's leaders. And taking your questions live. Spotlight Now, where Hawaii comes to talk.
Well, great conversation today with our guests on the film industry and the future of the industry here in the state of Hawaii. We started off our conversation starting with Georgia Skinner from DBEDT to really get a sense of where things stand right now. And as she mentioned, she said that this is a tough time in the industry as a whole, not only specifically here to Hawaii, but an industry as a whole where they are seeing a lot of drawbacks, and they're seeing some slowdowns in the different markets and productions, but still feeling that Hawaii is still able to stay somewhat competitive.
Yeah, contraction in the industry overall that she really attributes to some leftover COVID, and then also looking at the writer's strike that hit about a year ago. And interesting to hear on who we're competing with, because I tend to think about states on the continent, but really she's saying it's international. It's Australia and New Zealand, and there's some factors that you can't control, like the currency exchange, but others that you can. can, and that is the tax incentives. And so that's what she and Chris Lee are really pushing for. Right now, we're at a $50 million cap on those tax credits. She says she wants to get to $75 to $100 million. They think that could move the needle. And also Chris talking about that new facility.
Yeah, sounds like that facility could play a major role in any other future production. So you really heard from him about the momentum that's moving in that direction, how he feels that things are going well, but they're going to have to really make sure that studio out on the west side is not only built, but will help to attract some of those other productions that Hawaii is seeking. And then we also heard from Eric as well. So a great show as a whole.
Yeah, exciting to hear from Eric. A Kevin Costner movie on the way. He's pitching several series that hopefully would maybe shoot on those sound stages. So a lot happening there. We wish you a Merry Christmas. Next week, we'll be doing a year in review wrapped, looking at the big stories that happened in the economics, in politics, and overall. So we hope you join us then on New Year's Eve.
Merry Christmas.